Hello everyone, welcome to our little show. We're discussing 70s and 80s cinema in regards to production context and how it has affected the industry as a whole.
We're going to compare and review 70s and 80s cinema to show how it's relevant to today's society.
This is important because we know how cinema has evolved during those times, and it's very interesting to know how different it was compared to now. We are going to show the differences.
So the movies we are going to compare to today are the 1970s smash hit MASH, and we are also going to compare the horror Alien and its impromptu sequel Aliens. The last movie we'll be going to look at is 1989's Batman.
Our intentions are to analyse certain modern features such as the use of special effects, representation of female characters and violence, and how genres change films over the years.
We are going to look at how these films have affected the modern world, with issues such as how the women were viewed as in comparison to these movies, how masculinity was betrayed, and how it has evolved through the 4 decades. Another thing we intend to analyse is how the state of the world was during the film's production compared to the modern era.
So with that being said, let's get to the oldest film on our list, 1970's MASH. MASH is a war-themed comedy directed by Robert Altman in 1970. It's set in the Korean War, but the context of the movie has connotations of the Vietnam War.
MASH uses a lot of jokes that make light of women and where they belong in society. Lines such as, if you didn't have such a great body, you would be out of the job. This would not be received well by moviegoers and critics alike and will be severely backlashed, and the film would receive controversy.
So when we look back at the movie, there's times where the humour and the jokes just leave you feeling very cringy. With that being said, although it does feel dated, there's moments where the film is absolutely hilarious and it can really bring up certain black humour vibes which were very, very much in the 70s.
This movie had a huge impact in its field. MASH went from being a novel to a film, and as a result spawned a TV series.
Looking at MASH in the modern times, we know it wouldn't be well received due to the elements that make up the film: a light-hearted view of war and violence, a terrible view of women's place and society, and an almost strange look at masculinity.
Moving on to another really successful film, Alien is particularly relevant as it really innovated a new genre. Alien was a horror film but used a lot of sci-fi elements, which kind of created a new genre called sci-fi horror.
What is important about Alien is that it managed to take a minor character from irrelevance to prominence. In the case of Ripley, as she develops throughout the film into a strong female character. This is a fantastic example of storytelling, as it shows a zero to hero type journey.
This is also very important, as in that time, movies in the sci-fi and the horror genre were very male dominated and the plot lines were very male orientated. So really, when we think about it, Alien transcended the whole genre and it made a huge wave of impact. This shows that it is acceptable for women in the modern era and even in that time to be a star.
In the case of characters, Ripley also managed to get characteristics from masculinity, like being a strong character and also being a very strong female character. She's all kind of a well-rounded character as the story goes on.
For a futuristic film, the only really special effect in Alien is the space backdrop, which does a fantastic job of setting the scene in regards to the alien itself. They use practical design and effects. The way they do it is by lighting the alien rather darkly. This sets the alien up as the main force of evil in the narrative, as darkness reflects evil. This is essential as the people need to fear the alien.
So now to shift decades, I feel if we're going to talk about Alien, we need to also talk about its sequel, Aliens. This came out in 1986 and was directed by James Cameron. With the change of director came also a change in tone in the sequel's direction. With this, Aliens took more of an action-oriented turn. This is important as when we look at the 1980s, it really reflects on that time. When we think about the 1980s, it was a time of hypermasculinity, and the shift in tone is reflected here. Of course, we still have the sci-fi horror setting and the elements that go with that, but the change is key, as it came in a time where things are bigger, badder, and better. Or at least that's the term that is said, and it really shows the franchise moving in a forward direction, whether you think it's for better or for worse.
You can see the change in Ripley's character now, especially she's now brave, she's bigger, she's not afraid of anything anymore, and she also takes on a motherly role to the character New in Aliens. Showing that she's a multi-layered character, and she's capable of taking on several roles. For example, she's a masculine heroine, the underdog, the strong female lead, and even a caring mother type. This really shows how relatable she is to the character as well.
Aliens is certainly a violent film, as there is a lot of gore in it. Considering this is an 80s film, it certainly belongs in the period, as at times it can feel mindless or almost just there. Just like its sequels, there is not too many special effects, although the film's practical effects are fantastic. Alien Queen is once again kept in the dark and moody lighting. This works 100% as any limitations of the look of the Queen is hidden, therefore keeping the fear alive.
When we look at Alien and its sequel Aliens, it's easy to see why they had such an effect on the industry. I'm going to be awkward now, and I'm going to switch to a completely different genre, and we're going to look at the 1980s Batman.
If we're going to talk about political climate during the film's release, the message sends that the police are kind of weak as Batman takes on kind of a vigilante role, and he becomes the main force to stop crime.
This suggests as viewers during these times authority cannot be trusted, and we all have to account for ourselves and our actions.
When we also look at the message of masculinity, this is really important, as if we think of doing things yourself, we think of being the man taking the masculine role, and that really gives us connotations of being strong and fearless and taking charge. If we consider the 80s as the peak of hypermasculinity, then we can certainly see that Batman perfectly reflects that, not only as a character, but in this film when he takes on the role as a symbol of masculinity.
Vicky Vale has great ambition, and if we think of it as she represents female characters, she's empowered and she's got good qualities for women at the time. She has ambition, a strong-willed nature, and a very caring nature as well.
On the contrary, she does have moments of weakness. For example, she does get kidnapped. Therefore, a heroine Batman, a dominant male symbol, is there to save her. This sends mixed messages, as she is supposed to be a powering figure towards women, but she ends up playing the damsel in distress. This does sum up that the time period, as in the 80s, everybody was trying to find an identity, so this confused role sums up the time period where everybody doesn't truly know who they are.
Considering that Batman is an iconic comic book character, it has to follow the violence in a kind of iconic way. The violence is over the top and exaggerated, and the punches are quite comical, and the sounds are very jokey. This leaves you feel like you've read the comics as well. It gives you the warm and power effect. In fairness, this is staying true to the original comics and the 60s TV show, but on the other hand, you could also say that this movie does not move on well with the style of the 80s, at least in the way it portrays violence.
With that being said, all of these movies have been a great commercial and also artistic success on the industry. They still have quality that holds up today when watching in the modern era. Although each film has something that makes you think, yeah, that definitely belongs in that time period. But with that being said, I think it was an absolute pleasure to watch them all back and to study and to analyse each film. We do thank you for your time today, guys, and we hope you really have enjoyed the review. And until next time, we bid you farewell.